All right, my people, let's talk a little philosophy. Today we're going to talk about naturalism. Naturalism has been a thing in philosophy for about ever. A lot of people will say that Aristotle was the first naturalist, and that's probably not going back far enough. There were plenty of folks doing naturalistic sorts of philosophy long before Aristotle. But that rich history in academic Western philosophy is not why I thought it would be helpful to clarify the term naturalism. It's all of these videos that attempt to discuss or argue about or destroy or support naturalism that made me want to do a video. When you watch these videos and look at the comments section, it becomes very clear very quickly that people are using the term in very, very different ways and thinking about very, very different things. So in order to help shed a little bit of light on it, I figured we would start by 1, giving a loose general idea of what naturalism is and the loose collection of theories that term applies to. Then we're going to break naturalism down into 2 different sorts of naturalism to help narrow it down and get a clearer picture of the way people are using the term. Then I'm going to point out a bunch of kind of mistakes and misconceptions people have about naturalism and non-naturalism. And lastly, I'm going to tell you what I believe regarding naturalism and why I believe it. Probably not going to be a super robust attempt at a logical proof, but it should be enough to give you all something to fight about in the comments section. Speaking of the comments section, if you've watched any of my videos or looked at the comment section of any of my videos, you know that the comment section is probably what makes this YouTube philosopho-flavored community the very coolest in the history of the world. To that end, I will ask, treat each other with dignity and respect, attack the arguments, not each other. All that said, what's naturalism? Naturalism, historically in philosophy, has been used to describe a really loose and varied collection of theories and positions. And because that collection of theories, theses, and positions is so broad and so varied, the only thing one can say for certain about a naturalist, if all we know about them is that they are a naturalist, is that the natural will play some sort of foundational role in their explanation of reality, existence, or what we can know about the world. That's it. I know it's sort of unsatisfying, but think of it the same way as if I were to try to define what a Christian was. There are so many different varieties with so many different beliefs. If I was going to make a claim that applied to all of them, just about the only claim I could make is, well, Christ plays a role in their faith. The same is true of naturalism. Not that Christ plays a role in the naturalist's faith, but that all we can say about it really is nature plays a foundational role in one's metaphysical or epistemological commitments. And that leads us to a distinction that we can make. The distinction between metaphysical versions of naturalism and epistemological versions of naturalism. Now, metaphysics is the philosophy of reality, existence. So metaphysical sorts of naturalism are going to be those sorts that use nature foundationally in their explanation of what exists in the world. So they'll be saying everything that exists and everything that is real is natural in some sense. The only really big thing that this does is it excludes the supernatural. So the metaphysical naturalist, oftentimes referred to as an ontological naturalist, ontology being the branch of metaphysics that studies being and existence, all they're doing is saying all that exists is natural. And what doesn't exist? The supernatural. That means no God, no gods, no souls, no spirits, no ghosts, no goblins, no angels, no demons, and no magic. Nothing supernatural at all. That's the general idea of metaphysical or ontological naturalism. In some of these videos, people will refer to it by a whole bunch of different names as well. Some people refer to it as philosophical naturalism, or hard naturalism, or conservative naturalism, or strict naturalism, or naturalism. It's why it's so important when you encounter a term like naturalism to really ask what someone means by the term. Epistemological naturalism, not surprisingly, has to do with epistemology, which is the branch of philosophy that studies knowledge. What is knowledge? What does it take to know something? What is true? What serves as adequate justification for a belief such that we can claim to know something? Those are the sorts of questions that epistemology asks and attempts to answer. So it will come as no surprise that epistemological naturalism amounts to a commitment that the only things that we can know are natural. which means although the supernatural things might exist, we will never be able to know them for some reason. So even if God, gods, souls, spirits, angels, demons, devils, goblins, ghouls, and magic exist, they aren't the sorts of things we could ever know. Epistemological sorts of naturalism are often referred to as methodological naturalism. However, in some of the videos I mentioned, people also refer to it as philosophical naturalism, or just naturalism, or liberal naturalism, or moderate naturalism, or weak naturalism. So again, if you see the term naturalism, you got to follow up and ask clarifying questions, or really dig in to see what sort of naturalism the person using the term is committing to. So now we have a pretty good idea of what naturalism is. It's either going to be some sort of commitment saying whatever exists in the world is natural, in some sense, or whatever we can know about the world is natural, in some sense. Now that we have an understanding of two general flavors of naturalism and a fresh shirt, let's dive into the mistakes and misconceptions I see in YouTube videos. The first and most prevalent mistake by far is lumping all naturalist positions together. It would be the same as if I attacked all Christian beliefs based on a criticism of New Earth creationism. All Christianity is wrong because it's clear that the earth is not approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years old, so Christianity on the whole fails. As well you know, there would be lots and lots of Christians saying, excuse me, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe in New Earth creationism, but I'm still a Christian. The same is true of naturalism. When people attribute beliefs of one flavor of naturalism to all of them, they're making a mistake. The second mistake I see a ton of is equating naturalism to materialism, or worse, equating naturalism to a very specific form of materialism. Now, materialism, and the term materialism has kind of fallen out of favor for physicalism, is the belief that the world and everything in it is either made up of material or physical substance, or best explained in terms of material or physical substances or processes. One of the reasons physicalism is more popular in name than materialism is materialism gives the impression that you can only talk about or think about or explain anything in terms of like subatomic particles or something. And that's not always the case. There are lots of materialist or physicalist positions that allow for the existence of more than subatomic particles. In the last 50 years, one of the most influential chunks of philosophy done was by a guy named David Chalmers when he introduced the concept that the mental was irreducible to the physical, however, it's still natural. So we could have properties of things that aren't material or physical that could exist in the world and still have a naturalist account. That's a really popular position in philosophy of mind. And you're completely excluding it if you're saying everybody who's a naturalist is a materialist. You might have arguments against a property dualism, or you might have arguments against other sorts of physicalist accounts that allow for things like abstract entities, quantities, relational properties, but you can't just act like they don't exist. The last mistake I see really isn't a philosophical mistake, but it's a mistake about philosophy, is a misunderstanding regarding the prevalence of non-naturalist and naturalist positions. It shows up in my comments section quite a bit. People seem to see a lot of theistic YouTube philosophy videos and think that the debate over this broadly construed metaphysical or epistemological naturalism is a hot topic in philosophy and has a whole bunch of folks on either side. It doesn't. I would be willing to bet if you were to go to the top 100 colleges and universities in philosophy, 9 out of 10 philosophers are going to be naturalists. That isn't to say you won't find any non-naturalists anywhere. You will. You will find them doing philosophy of religion, or you will find them at places like Notre Dame, or Pepperdine, or Gonzaga, or Liberty. What do they all have in common? They're faith-based schools. Those happen to be Christian ones. But on the whole, in philosophy, just about everybody's a naturalist. I can only think of 2 people who I ever encountered who would have openly raised their hand and been like, oh yeah, I'm a non-naturalist. And the only one I can think of who would have argued for it as part of the work he did or the research he was doing was a guy named George Beeler, who most recently I think was at Yale. I'm sure he's long since retired. But his non-naturalism didn't have anything to do with God necessarily. It had to do with thinking that rationalist intuitions couldn't be explained in terms of nature, and they were central to philosophical explanation. That's a far cry from non-naturalism supports the idea of an all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful being. So, mistakes and misconceptions considered, what do I believe? Oh my God, new shirt and I got my hair did? I'm like a Eras tour stop without the talent or entertainment value. So what is it that I believe? My beliefs regarding naturalism versus non-naturalism really are determined by my commitments regarding reason. If you've watched anything on this channel, 99% of it has to do with applying informal logic. Aristotle's basic rules of inference, kind of the rules that govern the relationship between ideas. I believe in reason. And whether you think that reason is important because God gave us reason and it seems to distinguish us from the rest of the creatures on the planet, and therefore it's likely the thing that's most divine in us because we believe and have faith that he made us in his image, which would be a really kind of Thomist explanation of it, or you believe that holy shit, we developed these insanely big, huge, beautiful, complicated brains, and reason is the result of some insanely elaborate, complex neurophysiochemical processes that take place in that spectacular computer that's inside our melon. Reason works. All of the beliefs that I'm going to hold to be candidates for knowledge have to be rationally justifiable. One of the things that makes a belief rationally justifiable is that it is the most likely and best explanation. It's the most probable. I have never seen or encountered or come across an argument that even comes close to successfully arguing for a belief about the supernatural that is the best explanation for whatever it's trying to explain. I'll give you an example that people might be familiar with. There's all those ghost hunting shows out there. There was a dude, Zach Baggins, who was like aggro, testosterone-y, slick back hair. Like, I'm going to fight ghosts, like super mask. I'm going to go throw down with ghosts. Bring it on. Rawr. And which is just hilarious to me. But those ghost hunting shows, right? They'd go in to some creepy old house and hang out there, blah, 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 shit would happen. And there would always be an EVP, an electronic voice phenomena. And you'd see the little squiggly little lines like the sound wave supposedly showing up on the screen, and it'd be like, and then I'll be listening, and they listen to it like 2 or 3 times, and then someone would be like, oh my God, did you hear it? It said, I'm going to kill you all, get out of the house. And you're sitting there listening to it, and you're like, but then eventually one of the other dudes would be like, oh my God, I heard it too. And then they'd like slow it down or speed it up and then put the text right next to it until it kind of vaguely sounded like something that was like, and they're all like, oh my God, I heard it. Well, is the most likely explanation for that a supernatural entity of the woman in white who was murdered the night before her wedding, who roams the halls of the old spooky house, and we don't understand how physically she's there, how would something supernatural that's non-physical occasion physical stuff in the world, right? Sound waves are physical things. I can create them with physical processes. How would a supernatural thing, how would a soul make a voice phenomena that can be recorded? Because the recorder and the sound waves, those are physical things. How does a non-physical thing do that? There are no explanations for any of that, let alone a most likely explanation. In order for someone to know that the woman in white exists and she left the creepy EVP, they would have to have an explanation that is more likely than a bunch of dudes who were in a creepy ass house really wanted to believe, heard something, and in their brains, they believed it. They made it fit what they wanted to believe, the way humans have done since the dawn of time. And we have countless examples of people doing that and then finding out, oh my gosh, they convinced themselves. So what does that make me? It makes me an epistemological sort of naturalist, because anybody who's ever attempted to give justification for belief in the supernatural has not given adequate rational justification for that belief. They haven't given adequate evidence or an explanation such that their explanation of what they're specifically arguing for is more likely than any other alternative. Does that make me a metaphysical naturalist? Not necessarily. I'll remain silent on that. I'm agnostic regarding metaphysical naturalism. Am I a methodological naturalist? That depends a little bit on who's using the term. If someone's saying methodological naturalism and what they mean is science is the best method for exploring the natural world, therefore it's the only method for justifying beliefs such that those beliefs count as knowledge, I'm probably not that, because I think there are things we can know about the natural world that are natural explanations that aren't specifically the result of a very particular scientific methodology. So I hope that helps clarify naturalism a little bit. helps you overcome some of the mistakes and misconceptions that I see, and gives you an idea of where I stand, even though I didn't give a full-fledged, really robust argument for my naturalism. One thing I will say is, you still have no idea if I believe in God. But what you do know is that if I have faith in God, if I believe in God, I will never, ever, ever treat those beliefs as if they're knowledge and give them the level of credence that I would give to rational, empirically justifiable claims about the world. I am sure there are plenty of things I left out or things that were ambiguous or vague or poorly explained. I'll address as many of them as I can in the comments. Until the next video, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. Bye.